I'm Cameron Strang, and welcome to Unedited. My guest today is author, speaker, and new church planner, Bianca Olthoff. She's a brand new book out titled How to Have Your Life Not Suck, Becoming Today Who You Want to Be Tomorrow, and is one of the cast members on Relevant's new podcast for church leaders called. It premieres September 18th. She's a little busy. Bianca is passionate about community, telling people about Jesus, and impacting lives. Before what she's doing now, she spent years working with Christine Kane as a creative leader and storyteller at A21 and Propel. If you missed my conversation with Christine a couple episodes ago, go check it out. In the conversation you're about to hear, Bianca and I talk about what it's like being a woman in church leadership, what it's like pastoring with her husband, Matt. We talk about her story growing up in Los Angeles in a religiously conservative family. We talk about self-esteem and overcoming challenges in life. And yes, we talk about what her conservative mom thinks about the word suck in her book title. Bianca is quickly becoming one of my favorite people. I'm so grateful we have her voice in church leadership today. Before we get going, I want to thank our sponsors for making today's episode possible. BetterHelp, Skillshare, and the Wheaton College Graduate School. I'll tell you more about them coming up. Well, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Bianca Olthoff. So thanks for doing this. This is fun.
I'm so excited.
Why are you in Orlando?
I'm on book tour. So there's an event tonight, Friday night, at Action Church in Orlando, Winter Park. And we're excited. We were expecting probably like 500, and there's over 900 that RSVP'd. So not just RSVP'd, they actually got a ticket. And we're in the middle of a hurricane, so we all kind of kept our expectation low.
Yeah.
And it's like back to school and all this other stuff. And so we were like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you don't
turn up.
But you don't know how Floridians roll. They're saying there's a hurricane. And we're
this is just like every day for y'all.
Yeah.
I literally thought I was having like a power outage because I would see these like sparks and I realized, oh, that's lightning. I'm not even kidding you. I had no clue. I'm from California. Cam, we don't have these.
Your state, like mudslides and fires and earthquakes.
It's just the season. We haven't had. Okay, actually, we did have an earthquake not too long ago.
Yeah.
But they're fun, and they're over in a second. You know, it's like, well, the big ones, okay, that's fine.
I think
you'll have hurricanes every season.
But here's the deal: we know a week out. We see it coming. The weather's fine. Oh, in a few days, it'll be rainy. So we can prepare and it's not stressful. You guys, a wildfire just shows up and it's like, oh crud, we got to like react to it.
That's true. That's true.
I think the constant fear of the ground might fall out underneath me.
Wait a minute. We do have telltale signs. Are you familiar with earthquake weather?
No. So,
okay, I know people think I'm like a whack job, but it's literally true. If we experience like high hots and low colds, earthquakes are...
Oh, the expansion and contraction of the earth.
So it's tectonic plate shifts that move that causes the earthquake. So if we go from like really hot to really cold, we're prone for an earthquake. So you know. So
you guys don't have like china cabinets and you don't have like open shelving in your kitchens where the plates are stacked up real high?
Open shelving. Well, the cool hipster houses, like they will, but it's probably not safe.
Right, because that stuff's going to come off the shelf.
Totally and completely. Yeah.
Well, that's just dumb.
But wait. But our weather is amazing.
Yeah. That's true.
We have the beach. We have Disneyland. We have Napa. We have
Joshua Tree, you got everything.
Palm Springs. I mean, it's the promised land.
Right.
I'm not even kidding you. Like, relevant offices are moving to SoCal.
That's actually a real thing, for real. Like, we're talking about doing things. We're talking about decentralizing and having a spot in LA and Nashville and here.
I'm saying, wait, what, Lord? Wait, God's speaking to me right now. He's saying yes and amen.
I mean, like, no. We've been actively talking about that for the last couple of months. Like, it would help our mission and business
1,000%
to have a small outpost out there. You know, maybe in the design district in LA, just have like a loft or something that we could have 2, 3, 4 people, something like that. When I was out there we did an interview with Jerry Lorenzo, who does Fear of God. Mm-hmm. Their office is right there in an unmarked loft in the design district.
I'm telling you.
It's awesome. That's why I was like, we'll just be around there.
I love how you said Jerry Lorenzo with like a question mark. Fear God.
I don't know if you know him.
Please, first of all, I know that you are like, you're into shoes, and I'm an LA girl, and Jerry Lorenzo is actually, my husband just got some.
Okay.
Yes. Well, but here's the thing. I told him, I said, baby, you can't wear those shoes because the last thing we need is for you to be on Preachers and Sneakers.
Completely true.
But his shoes were $80. I guess like you can buy them and then you resell them for like a jacked up price or something like that. I don't know. Whatever.
If you can get because they just released some kind of like more normal ones.
Yeah.
That they have also like $350 ones that then resell for $2,000.
Yeah.
But like the new moccasins, that's what he got. Those are cool.
Well, he ended up getting like 3 pairs, and you have to go into a lottery. So you can only buy 1 pair, but he's entered the lottery like multiple times. I'm like, okay, you're done. All right. You're done. No more.
I have 1 pair of Fear of Gods, and it was because I have a friend who works at Nike and he sent them to me as a gift. So
nice.
I
Jerry, you interviewed Jerry and he didn't give you any?
No. His assistant gave me access to like the friends and family thing so you could buy them before they go out for those lotteries and stuff like that. And I forgot to activate the email. And so I didn't. And then when I did like a few weeks later, when I tried to do it, like the link had expired. And I emailed her and I was like, hey, can you give me a new link? And I never heard from her again. And I was like, I'm kicking myself. Anyway, so you guys just planted a church in Orange County.
We did. Well, actually, we can't say just anymore because we are 11 months in already.
Yeah, that's just.
Okay, thank you.
It's not even a 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
So what prompted that?
Well, I would say, okay, the long short of it, or the short long of it, depending on how you view it. My husband was on staff at a church out in Orange County called Mariners Church. It's a really big church.
Huge church.
And it's so funny because you can be in this huge environment and be surrounded with like all the staff and all the people and all the things and still feel completely like isolated or have like a false sense of community. And so that's kind of what we were experiencing. And at the time, he was studying to become a sommelier. And then once he passed level 1, he was just really good at it. And I loved it. I loved that he was kind of like becoming alive to it. And so I encouraged him to like study and go for level 2, which would include like a greater depth of knowledge and then also the serving aspect and all this other stuff. And so
was he working at a restaurant?
No.
He just did it for fun?
Yeah. We were to give, and so I thought maybe he would like curate wine cellars for people because we live in Orange County and there's a bunch of like bougie people that would like love for someone educated to come in and just like do their cellar. And so that was kind of like the thought. Maybe he would like moonlight for like once or twice a week just for fun. And then it was in Napa that he went to go take his level 2. And it was there I realized, I'm like, he really loves this and he's really good at this. And I have a natural palate, I have a natural nose, like I could pick up these things. So it was just something fun that we got to do together. But then it started getting to the point where I'm like, okay, you're not making money off of this. This is very time consuming. He was waking up at 4:00. He had his videos, he had his note cards. Until this day, Cameron, we have a laminated poster of every grape varietal in the world that is in our garage because he would go out and like he created a mental grid in his head. So by deduction, he could deduce what the wine is, the region, the year, and the flavors. So by the time level 3 came around, I was like, okay, listen, I love you. This is a great hobby, but what are we doing with it? So I said, let's just have food and wine night. So a friend of ours is a chef. He's a somm. They got together, created a food menu, and we love to host at our house. And we just started inviting people. Some people were from church, but it was like my yoga instructor, this guy he goes to this burger joint, and the bartender there, he invited him, and just some random people, also people that were studying to become somms, he invited them to the house. And it was just something that we absolutely loved, and we got to meet people outside of like the Christian bubble, which we really appreciated. And 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months. And then it just started to grow. It was like more people. It was like 20 people, 30 people, 40 people. And it was one night, a girl, I'm sitting across the table from her, and we're just like chatting, and she said, I love my church. I said, oh, because I'm thinking, I didn't know she went to church. I said, really, where's your church? She said, this is my church. We talk about God and we have food, and isn't that called communion? And I tried just, like smiling and nodding, whatever. And then that night I told Matt, I said, hey, so-and-so said that this is her church. And I laughed. And he said, Bianca, I think we're starting a church. And I said, I think you drank too much but when we were dating, I said, do you have any ambition to become a senior pastor? And he said, no. I said, great, then we could date. Because I was not going to be a pastor's wife. I was not going to be like in ministry. I wanted to be bivocational, love the church, and not work for the church. Mm-hmm. And And that's how it started. I think the confirmation, though, because I was still in denial, I went up to a church. I got invited to a church called the Father's House up in Vacaville, California. It's right in between San Francisco and Napa. I had never heard of Vacaville. Have you heard of Vacaville?
No.
Exactly. No one's heard of Vacaville, except I got invited, and I've never heard of this city, but they said, hey, we're expecting 3,000 women. Will you come to the women's event and then stay for the weekend service? I said, 3,000 women in Vacaville. Sure, that sounds like fun. And by the way, I'm a 7 on Enneagram. So my filter for anything isn't like strategic, financial. It's like, is this fun? So it sounded fun. And I went and I had Cameron Mike backgrounds in church. Like I love church. I was a church kid, pastor's kid, ministry kid. Like I love church. But I walked into this campus and there was something in the air that I could not put my finger on. I walked into the worship center and worship was going on. And I had to sit down by song 2 because I felt like I was going to cry. Like my legs were like, I just felt so emotional being there. And the worship just was so electric. And when I say that, I'm not talking about like jumping around with like shofars and tambourines. I'm just talking about, it was just the purest worship I'd heard in such a long time. The senior pastor, I'd never heard of him. He's like this hippy dippy guy, that traveled around in a bus telling people about Jesus in the 60s, landed up in Vacaville and has this church of 10,000 people. And so I was there. It was amazing. And God was good. And I, preached my heart out and it was awesome, whatever. That night, Pastor Dave, because they're located so close to Napa, they have this huge hospitality culture. So we have this shared love for hospitality. And he said, why is that? And I'm like, oh, well, my husband and I have these dinners at our house. And that was it. Well, the next morning, I'm there to preach at their 3 services. And he introduces me and says, Bianca and her husband, Matt, are church planting in Orange County, California. And I'm sitting in the front row like,
was he just mistaken? Or?
That's what I thought. So after that service, I called Matt, my husband, and I said, this guy's a heretic. He said, we're church planting. And he said, Bianca, we are. I said, no, we're not. Like, whatever. 3 months later, after much like kicking, screaming, praying, and like feeling like God had called us to church plant, I said, okay, but we have to go back to this random church in Vacaville because I can't tell you, but if we build a church, I want it to be like this. And so two of our friends and Matt, we went up. And my husband is from Minnesota, a man of German descent, and the Germans, they're organized and non-emotional and on the time. He married a Puerto Rican. Like we are like totally opposite. So I'm like, he thinks I'm already emotional. So I'm thinking, okay, there's this church, we're gonna have a worship experience, like whatever. Second song of worship, my non-emotive husband, who I've seen this man cry twice in almost 10 years. The first was on our wedding day, and yet even then, like maybe a tear came out and then he sucked it back in. That's the level of emotionality of my husband. He sat down and began to cry. And he said, this feels like my soul is being refreshed. And I said, that's the church I want to build. And that night we went to dinner. We went to Napa with Pastor Dave, and like joking around, my friend, who's not even part of our church, was just like, hey, would you consider having like a Father's House, Orange County? And he said, actually, it's funny. Last year, someone said that there's going to be this God connection between Southern California, specifically Orange County. So yeah, let's talk. And at that time, love Mariners, super great, but Mariners does not believe in like women leading at that high of a level. And then my background, my dad's church, like women do not lead at all.
Really?
Preach, teach, nothing, esteem women, but not really empower women. So I was like totally an outlier my whole life. Then to be under like Pastor Dave, and he like loves, esteems, empowers women. And he thought the concept of Matt and I, because he knows my strengths and he knows Matt's strengths. And he said, I think this is like 5-fold ministry. You guys have it all. And so that night we said, we're going to go home and pray about the Father's House, Orange County. And that's how we started.
How do you take the thing that was unique about your food and wine nights and the community and that? You're like, I think we're planning a church. This is a church. How do you convey that to then now we're meeting in an auditorium and we have the same formula as every other church?
Yeah. So that is a huge value for not just me, but like our entire team, because all of our team and everyone said, you're going to have a contingency of people that are going to be like, we want to go back to the house. We want to go back to the house. Not one person has said, I want to go back to the house except me, because that was such a big value for me. I felt like God was there, man. We had like these amazing life-changing conversations. And so a big value for us is whenever we have a staff meeting, like our staff meeting, we always have food. Like that's just how we roll. When we we hit the threshold of 400 salvations in the church, my husband said, you know what, and I preached, we did a whole series called New Wine. And of course, because you have a psalm as your pastor, we can talk about it with education. And my message was on champagne. And so we were coming on the heels of that, and everyone had this really deep love for the process of champagne, because we want the party, we want the pop, we want the elevation, but we don't want the process of it. So we want the promise of this amazing thing without the process. And so we got to celebrate the process. So we opened up a bottle of champagne, we toasted, and we carried on with our meeting. In fact, our I guess most churches call them like small groups or whatever. We have community tables, and each of them are, hey, you don't have to do a full-on Bianca and Matt style meal, but like, hey, bring some chips, some guac, what salsa, like, what do you want? Whatever your group wants, because food is a big value. And like, if you look at the book of Luke, Jesus was either coming to a party, going to a party, or at a party. 70% of the book is Jesus partying around the dinner table. And so I think it's just a huge value that we never want to let go of. We love our volunteers well. Our team is phenomenal. And so far, we're 11 months old. We've already had 3 like really big catered gatherings for our team, because we just never want to lose that.
That's awesome.
Except our communion is with grape juice.
Is it really?
It really is. Yeah.
Why?
I think it's my legalist roots. Like, I come from a very conservative background. And also, like, as a Latina, there's a lot of alcoholism in our community. And like, my dad was an alcoholic and his dad was an alcoholic. And so I'm just really cautious. And I would hate for someone to come up and partake of like the Lord's Supper and then feel tempted to be like, I'm slipping into darkness. This is like my BC days or whatever.
I went to a church that had I grew up with the grape juice as well. And then I went to a church for a few years that didn't. It had real wine. And it was funny, like, to serve everybody. They also then had, and over here on the other corner, we have gluten-free wine.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, what? Yeah. Like, what about the non-alcoholic option if you're going to give gluten-free? Anyway.
Yeah.
It's funny. Well, today's episode of Unedited is brought to you by BetterHelp. If you've listened to our podcasts or read Relevant Magazine at all, you know that counseling and mental health is something we think is incredibly important. We all run into things that can interfere with our happiness and prevent us from achieving our goals. BetterHelp is online counseling that connects you with a professional counselor in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient. You can now get help on your own time and at your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions, plus chat and text with your therapist. They have licensed professional counselors specializing in everything from depression to anger, anxiety, grief, self-esteem, family issues, you name it. BetterHelp has 3,000 licensed therapists across all 50 states. And you know what? If you're not happy with your counselor for any reason, you can request a new one at any time. Everything you share is confidential, and you can start communicating in under 24 hours. BetterHelp is available on desktop, and then they have mobile, web, and also Android and iOS apps. And financial aid is available for those who qualify. BetterHelp is a truly affordable option. Right now, Unedited listeners get 10% off your first month with the discount code RELEVANT. So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/relevant. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you'll love. That's betterhelp.com/relevant. So growing up, legalistic home, no women in ministry. You're a rebel.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we can call it that. I think that's like the biggest tension point right now.
How has that played with your family?
Well, okay. So just last week, so my parents love me and they clearly see that God's doing something in my life. But just last week we had a conversation because they came to visit. We did something at the church, just launched a book. And so it was like Launch Book Sunday, and I was able to give a message out of the book, and parents were there. And on the title slide, as I walked up, it said, "The Father's House, Orange County, Pastor Bianca Juarez Olthoff." And that was the conversation at lunch. They're like, "But you're not really a pastor, BB. Just take it down. Like, why cause division in the church?"
What?
Yeah, but they're totally loving about it. Like I think they're just concerned about how I'm going to be perceived. And so, okay, so it's a tension point for me right now because just 2 days ago I posted a video clip. Now, here's the thing. I love humor. Like honestly, I was a comedic writer in college. Like I love this trash. And so, and I think like if you can't laugh at church, like your church is probably boring. So we just have a fun culture at church. And I said a clip that the underlining of my book is based out of the book of Ruth, an Old Testament book. And one of the main characters is this guy named Boaz. So I have this ongoing bit where I'm like, we pray for Boaz, we pray for Boaz. And so I said during my single years, I was like praying for my Boaz, but God didn't give me a Boaz. God gave me a fine ass, and he wasn't a broke ass either. The church turned up, right? And I also said in the clip, I'm like, please don't come at me after service and say that was inappropriate because my mom is sitting on the front row and she's already giving me side eye. Mom, Jesus will forgive me. I like the clip cuts. Well, it did really well on social media, except there was like a onslaught of people. I could deal with people saying that's inappropriate. I could deal with people saying that was irreverent. And I received that, and it's probably right. But it was like my church. When you're with your family, you could talk a little bit different than you would in public. So maybe I shouldn't have posted on public. But the one that stung the most were people that said, this is why women shouldn't teach.
Oh, come on.
And honestly, it's affected me even till today. Like it's affected me to today. There's a part of me that wants to go and like delete it or archive it. But then I'm like, you're not my people. Like if you don't find this like funny, and then someone else said, "Oh, that's a shame that the church has now become like a comedy hour." One, I'm flattered that you think I'm a comedian, but two, you took a 20-second clip out of a 37-minute message that is rooted theologically with systematic theology as I go through the book of Ruth exegetically. So come at me. You don't want to know what's funny? The fact that you're taking 20 seconds and calling it a sermon, whatever. And I did reply that to him, but then I deleted it because I'm saved, whatever.
You and Carl Lentz can't help yourself sometimes.
I can't. So I'll say it and then say sorry.
It's the justice side of you. I can't believe that though.
Yeah, so it's honestly, it feels a little tough, but the beautiful thing, and I think that this is where Matt and I are finding our lane, is Matt is not a wallflower. And I think that people can maybe see me being like vocal and out there, and I travel and I write and I speak. And then they see, I think people might assume that like Matt is just kind of like a caddy, when the truth of the matter is Matt was on executive team for a mega church for 15 years. And prior to that, he played semi-pro football. And prior to that, he was in corporate for Banana Republic. Like the guy is amazing. And he's the one that's doing our strategic development. He's doing our fundraising. He's doing our HR. He's doing our internship program. And so what people coming to the church are saying, oh, wait, there's a strong guy who communicates and is not threatened that his wife is actually stronger in certain areas. And I'm not threatened that he's stronger in certain areas. And I think this, for the next generation of church, people want to see strong males and females working together, whether married or not married, and doing it well. So we're holding on to that.
Is the mix that you're primarily speaking and he's primarily running things behind the scenes?
So it was 50-50, but then there's so many details to this, but he teaches once a month. I teach 2 to 3 times a month. And then if it's only me twice, then we have someone from our team. So both he and I, like most church planners start when they're like 25 or whatever. Like, I'm 36. Like I feel like we're Abraham and Sarah. I'm 36 and he's 43. Like, he rocked the cradle. He won. Yes, Lord. So like, so I just feel like we're a little bit older and we're not trying to make a name for ourselves. Like we really feel passionate about grooming the next generation. So the vision is 10 churches in 10 years reaching 10,000 people. And we're not going for 10,000 mega churches. We want saturation, not concentration. So the idea of this mega church, like if we want to hold the table sacred, if we want to hold community sacred, that means the churches can't be over 1,000. Like that's the threshold. When it gets to 1,000, like you're going to lose a lot of intimacy and you're going to lose culture. And so unless you have like vanguards of culture, and that's really, really difficult to replicate at that huge of a level. And so we are already, we're going to, at our 1 year anniversary in a couple of weeks, we're announcing our second campus, which is going to be in prison. So we're super excited about that. And we're encouraging people to call TFH-CRC, which is the California Rehabilitation Center. It's a men's prison in Southern California. We're asking them, like, if you're on that serve team, that's your campus. Like, stay there and be there. So we're excited because it's going to be a pretty large campus. We're assuming it's a captive audience. So like it's going to be good. But all the things that we do at our church, from community groups with food, the prison's allowing us to bring in not a whole lot of stuff, but in prison, the commissary is like expensive. And so we get to bring in like different elements that will make it like fun and feel like us, from baptisms to community groups to live worship to the message. It's going to be us. So we're stoked.
Wow. Is your vision a bunch of video campuses?
No. Okay. So Matt and I, we're not public with this.
Culture?
So, okay. So somebody asked me like 2 years ago, like, what do you want your legacy to be? And it's forced me to really like sit there and like fight for what I want what I want my legacy to be. Because if you don't build up your legacy for the next 30 years, it probably won't happen. And so I was like, I want my legacy to be 20 world caliber Christian, deep, profound communicators of the gospel. And if that's the case, then I have to kind of minimize to highlight other people. And I have to sacrifice like my time to develop the next generation. So as of right now, there's 4 people that I believe are going to be, and here's the thing, if they stay in the house, amazing. If they don't, amazing. Like, I don't know who these 20 people are. They could be part of our church. They could not be part of our church. But these are the people that I meet with once a week. We talk about the roots of preaching, the roots of teaching. What are we reading? Preaching is proclaiming the gospel. Teaching is explaining the gospel. We need to have both in our services because it needs to be like 2 hands, 2 levers of a pulley. We need that balance. And if they're preaching, we give them a 4-week one, right? I ask them for an outline. They send me the outline. We review the outline. Then they send me a loose manuscript. Then we go through the manuscript. Then they make the edits. They tighten up the manuscript. I read it. Then I say record it. So then they record it, and then I listen to it because it's timing, it's cadence, it's flow, and sometimes you have to hear yourself before you even like professional athletes watch game reels. This is the way I want to treat these people. Like, you're a spiritual athlete. Let's be awesome. And
is that normal? I know nothing about this.
No, it's all the things I wish I would have had. Like, I feel like I've got raked over coals by so many people. Like, she's uneducated. Her dad's an immigrant. Like, she never went to seminary. Like, all of that. And I'm like, and I'm still here.
Your story is crazy. I mean, how did you get into ministry?
I never wanted to be in ministry. I grew up poor.
Yeah.
And so.
And you didn't read till you were 11.
Wow, Cameron, you know me. I feel so known right now, Cameron. So first generation American. I was born here, but my parents came here a little bit older in life. My mom's from Puerto Rico. My dad's from Mexico. They met at a party in East Los Angeles. And
can I ask you for real? Like, I've heard that Puerto Ricans and Mexicans don't like each other.
No, oh my gosh, no, they don't.
Yeah, okay.
Because
that's unusual.
Oh no, it's very unusual.
Okay.
So I'm creating my own race. I call them Mex-Ricans because it's the best of both worlds. Because we have pasteles and then we also have tamales, and they're both wrapped. One's with banana leaves, one's with corn husks. But I get the best of both. Like, it's so good. And so we get like the chill aspect of Mexicans, but we get the party turn up from the Puerto Ricans. It's the best race ever, all right? So, no, Puerto Ricans and Mexicans don't like each other. In fact, there wasn't a whole lot of Puerto Ricans in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But my grandparents came here for, like, they heard that the jobs were great, the weather was great, and that there was opportunity. So that's why my Puerto Rican side came here. And they're also light-skinned, green eyes, red, blonde hair, all that other stuff. My dad is, like, straight up Mexican, okay? Like, he had a mustache, like Fu Manchu status, like dark skin, dark hair, dark eyes. And so my grandfather was really upset. And my grandfather was also very racist. So even within the economy of like Hispanics or Latino culture.
Because Puerto Ricans look down on Mexicans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Cubans look down on everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. I mean, being in Florida.
But not as bad as the Spaniards. Spaniards
That's
look,
right.
oh yeah.
That's right. Uh-huh. But more the Caribbean.
Because we use the vosotros form, that's why. So yeah. So the fact that my parents actually got together, there was like definitely some tension. And then what was even greater tension was the fact that my parents accepted Jesus. So they left the Catholic faith. And so my grandparents on both sides thought my parents were in a cult and like, this is so bad. How could you leave Catholicism? And so their whole goal was like, hey, let's get out of East Los. Let's get out of here. My dad had ambitions and hopes of starting a Mexican restaurant, but then the Lord called him to make soul food. And they moved back to East LA, church planted, the concrete jungles of Los Angeles. And he's still there to this day, 30 years in, serving Jesus. And but because of that, there was a lot of sacrifices. So we were raised in a low income area, and my parents made a conscious decision not to send us to public school. We couldn't afford private school, and the public schools were so bad. Like their elementary schools had. This was before like Columbine and stuff. So the fact that there was like metal detectors at the entryway, and they're passing out condoms in 3rd grade. Like my parents were like, we cannot send our kids here. So we were homeschooled. Being homeschooled in LA is like the most not cool thing ever. And I struggled academically, and I threw myself into food. And so I was obese, illiterate, raised in the hood, female, first generation American. Like statisticians would have put me in a category, highest prone to failure. Like no one would have looked at me and said, wow, that girl's gonna achieve something. It was literally, I had a conversation with God at the age of 12. I had said, if you give me words, I'll give you my voice. That's it.
Unedited with Cameron Strang is brought to you by the Wheaton College Graduate School. With more than 20 master's, doctoral, and certificate programs, the Wheaton College Graduate School is preparing servant scholars to engage the world as humanitarian responders, therapists, theologians, biblical scholars, Christian camp leaders, and more. Find out how the Wheaton College Graduate School's flexible or residential programs will inspire, challenge, and equip you at wheaton.edu/unedited.
So walk me through from 12. Like I want to know the practical. You were homeschooled all the way through? Or
yeah. So I stopped because I said I wasn't going to cry on this stupid podcast. It's just so weird. I think it feels really weird. I feel like, I don't know. People ask me like how, and I don't know. It's literally the grace of God and like that chutzpah fighter spirit, you know, like immigrants get stuff done, you know? So I would say I had that conversation with God because I was so tired of being the stupid, dumb, obese brown kid. I didn't know I was poor. I didn't know I was brown. I didn't know any of that stuff until I went to church. I went to this church, and my parents were like one of the few minority families there. And it was there that I realized, oh, I'm poor. Oh, I'm dumb. Oh, okay. So I had that conversation with God, and this is going to sound like so after school special, like, and it all worked out. But literally within months, something just clicked. Like I went from not being able to string sentences together. Like I could spot read, mom, dad, cat, dog, but like putting cohesive sentences together, reading comprehension, reading retention, none of that, to reading novels in a day. Like and then I realized, oh, this is power. Knowledge is power. So then I threw myself into school, and I was homeschooled from age 5 until 13, 14 when I started high school. So we moved out of LA to a city called La Mirada. It's the burbs, but the church was still in LA. And we went to La Mirada High School, which is a public high school. This was my first entryway into like formal, organized like learning and structured learning. And I loved it. I was like, oh, I could win. If I could act white enough and get enough education, that means success. And success means money, and money means I will never be viewed like this again. That's where it changed. But then it became my God. And so I was a Bill Gates Millennium Scholar. I went on to college, graduated. I was president of my all 4 years, and then president of the school, captain of 3 varsity sports, vice president of the Bible Club, president of the Astronomy Club, vice president of Girls League. Like I loved high school, and then went to college. And I think that was the first time that I realized I was ashamed of my heritage, because I could create a whole new facade of who I wanted to be in college. And it was when my mom was diagnosed with brain cancer. And so my mom was diagnosed with brain cancer, and there was like this dysfunctional relationship with a man I refer to as Satan that I thought I was going to marry, and I didn't. But it was like the culmination of my mom's dying, this relationship's dying. I'm in my senior year of college. I'm here on academic scholarship. My grades sucked that last semester because there was so much going on. My grandmother, who is ill, is looking at her daughter die, which causes her turmoil. And this was like my Puerto Rican grandmother who sacrificed so much and worked in sweatshops in New York and LA. And this is how her life is going to end up. Where that was like kind of like that moment where I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like, God, if you're real. That was probably my, if you're real, do something. And the do something wasn't save my mom. The do something was show me that you care. Just show me that you care. You did it when I was 12. Do it when I'm 22. And God works in these like 10-year cycles with me. And that was like this huge turning point.
And did he?
He did. My grandmother passed away, and that relationship with the man I thought I was going to marry ended. But contrary to all the doctor's reports, we were preparing for my mom's funeral. In fact, I spoke with my mom this morning. God was so gracious with my mom, but I think the bigger learning lesson in all that wasn't that like my mom lived. The bigger learning lesson was that my faith was my own. It was no longer something that I thought I had a relationship with God. It was like, no, this is my own. In the same way that I had the conversation laying in my backyard of, if you give me words, I'll give you my voice. That was kind of like that turning point moment where I'm like, if you trust me to show yourself to me, I will never walk away.
How did you mention, like, when you went to college, you realized you were ashamed of your identity or your heritage? Like, how did that affect you? And did you change something about you?
You know, okay, so there's kind of like, there's like in the steps of like revelation, there's the awareness of it, the awakening to it, and then there's the questioning, like the now what, and then there's kind of like the action plan. So I would say like that was kind of like the awakening of it. I didn't have language. I just was realizing like, I'm so proud of all the sacrifices of my family, and yet I go to the world, and if I am very brown, if I am very loud, if I am very opinionated, then I will be deemed non-American. Mm-hmm. And like the whole plight of the sacrifice of all my family members was like, be American. In fact, my grandparents didn't want me to learn Spanish because they're like, we want you to assimilate. You are American. Mm-hmm. So then it was like this weird dichotomy that I was in. And then after grad school, I just was kind of like exploring kind of like, who am I now? And like, what does God have for me? And it was in grad school that I started serving in ministry. So I just wanted to own my own art gallery in LA, represent underrepresented artists, minority artists, females. And then while I was in grad school, I started serving in youth ministry. And then that was it. I was like, wait a minute, I can make the Bible come alive. Wait, when I talk about the Bible, you like it? This is amazing. And I had zero ambition of being in ministry, but like I loved talking about the Bible and seeing people love the Bible. It's like cooking. It's like you get onions, you get garlic, you get olive oil, and you let that all come together, and then you get stewed tomatoes, you let that sit, and then you get to add like fresh basil, and you get to add all these different spices and herbs and fresh cracked pepper, and you let that sit, and if you're lucky, you add just a few sprigs of fennel so that just comes to the wafting aroma of this soon-to-be tomato sauce you're going to put on this homemade pasta. That's how teaching the Bible feels to me. Like, that changed everything. So then I start teaching the Bible in an environment that didn't allow women to teach the Bible. So I stayed with women. And then I met a white guy from Minnesota of German descent on eHarmony who I could not figure out or peg. Divorced, dependents, debts. And I was like, sign me up. You my Boaz, boo. Like, oh my gosh. And probably 3 months into dating, unequivocally, he was just like, well, it's because you're ashamed to be a female. And I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, you're ashamed to be female, you're ashamed to be brown. And let me tell you something. If I had any residual Satan in my life, I was about to come out of my skin and like cut somebody. I'm like, how dare you? How dare you say that? And then he said, but you are. And Matt's an 8 on Enneagram. And so he was not threatened by any sort of like response. And we had a really hard conversation after that. And it was waking up to that reality. I can be American, and I could be so proud of my history and so proud of my heritage, so proud of being poor, because that's the plight of so many people right now. And I never want to lose that. And he was also saying, you feel like power is acting like a man. It's okay to be a woman. Teach like a woman, be a woman. And not like I wasn't. Like, Cameron, I wear fake eyelashes and high heels. It's not like I like have leather chaps and a mullet. Like, I'm very aware of my femininity. But I think it was like that shame that kind of was surrounded with it. Like, success is being a man. Success is being non-emotional. Success is being white. And success is being educated. And to me, I was just like, that's what I want. And now I get to walk in this season of like, success is beautifully broken, and success is all types of colors, and success is failure. And the season feels like so many wins and so many failures.
How when you were transitioning out of college and feeling called to ministry and wanting to teach, and your family, raised you in a church environment where you didn't fit in and you didn't, you felt called to do something that they didn't approve of. How did you straddle that? How did did you have to kind of block your family's opinion or approval out and pursue your own passions, or were they supportive? Or
okay, so the funny thing is I never set out to teach, to preach, to lead a church.
Food, you just couldn't help but not do it, you said.
You can't. I can't. It's like it literally just oozes out of me. And this is not because, I want to be on platform or this is a job. This ain't no freaking job. In fact, I don't get paid for everything at the church. My husband and I do not take a paycheck. We can't take a paycheck. Like, we would rather hire the next generation. Like, hey, let's go. But so I started teaching, and it was predominantly within women, and then youth was kind of okay. It was like this weird, ambiguous thing.
Can I ask the denomination background?
It's non-denominational, but it's Calvary Chapel background. So
I've just I grew up in a charismatic world where women are fine to preach and pastor.
Yeah,
and
not my background.
And so obviously Relevant covers many streams but one river, right? So I just can't believe that the women in ministry conversation is still a big deal. But I follow Beth Moore on Twitter, so I realize it is a big deal still.
It is a very big deal.
And I just don't get it, because I don't think that God's a respecter of persons, and the anointing is the anointing, and God's word is God's word. I just don't get it. But I do know that heritage and denominational legalism, really it's almost like in even family relationships, sometimes parents can't see outside of that lens, you know? Yes, you're my daughter, but it's like, this is wrong almost. And it's like a spiritual conviction.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. No, it is a spiritual conviction in our household. In fact, my dad was totally thrown off. Matt was just I think that we're going to have the most amount of people in our church for Easter, so I think you should take Easter and I'll take Good Friday. Well, my dad was just wait a minute, you're teaching Easter? Till this day, Cameron, our church is almost a year old. We have 500 people coming to our church, and my dad is not it's no bueno, brother. It's not good. So I just got to the point where I'm okay, I'm just going to do this. And I was predominantly teaching to women, and then, youth ish sometimes. And it was after I got married with Matt, and at Mariners, they invited me to be part of their teaching team. And I think my parents were still kind of a little bit suspect at that, but the real thrust, I think, was working for Christine Kane. So I worked with Chris for almost 7 years, A21, as chief storyteller for A21. And then when she launched Propel, I was creative director for Propel. So everything from the ground up. And being around someone who was just so authoritative of her knowledge of the Word of God. She's a preacher, but that woman is an evangelist through and through. And I got to sit under her and look at God's hand of favor, God's hand of anointing, God's hand of blessing upon her life. And I had to come to the point, literally, and I hope this doesn't get bleeped out, because you bleeped out a word that I said. I said the opposite of heaven, so you don't bleep me out, on the Relevant podcast, and you bleeped me.
No. First of all, I didn't. But if we bleep anything, we bleep for humor, because it's funnier to wonder what you said than what you actually said.
My conservative parents listen to everything thing I post, and I shared that episode. My mother was like, baby, what did you say? I said hell, mother. I said hell. That's not a bad word. It's in the Bible. Thanks a lot for getting me in trouble,
Unnecessary censorship is the funniest thing.
It is so funny, but not to my parents.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, so
I forgot about that.
So this was like the great conversation I had with God. I was like, one day I'm gonna come face to face with you, and you're gonna ask me what I did with your son. And I'm left with two options. It's either I share what you have done in my life and I unabashedly preach the gospel to people who need to know you, or I say nothing because I have a vagina. That's really what it whittled down to. And so if I err, I'm going to err on the side of telling people about Jesus. And if I get if I get a spanking in heaven, I get a spanking in heaven. My bad. But look at all these people that are in eternity because I got to share with my Uber driver like I did on the way here about Jesus, you know?
And your family's not okay with it? They're
not. I mean, here's the thing. Like, clearly they still come. Like, they'll come like on our 1-year anniversary.
That surprises me.
No, they'll still support. I think they're like, well,
how?
I don't know.
Like, are they coming around? Like, I'm really curious about this.
Yeah, they've actually come to church. And like I think by and large, so that one conversation that they had about like, but you're not a pastor and like take that down. I walked through an exercise that Matt did with me. He's like, okay, Bianca, what does a pastor do? Because I told Matt, I was like, because he said, well, you're a pastor. I said, I'm not a pastor. Paul's very clear about this. I'm not a pastor. Like, I'm not. And he's like, okay, well, what does a pastor do? So I listed 8, 10, 12 things that a pastor did. And he said, which one of those do you not do?
Right.
And that kind of like arrested me. So then,
how do you rectify that? If Paul said you're not.
And Paul is my Bible boyfriend. Like, I love me some Paul.
So how do you?
So I picked up a book on hermeneutics, specifically addressing women in leadership, women in ministry. And then I read Chris Vallotton's Fashion to Reign. Then I read Brady Boyd's Let Her Lead. And then I read, the name is escaping me, but it's a very academic book. Christine Kane was the one that gave it to me, where I land on having a theological understanding and I would say a God-given permission. I wish the Reform camp would see that. I feel like we are bleeding out a generation of women who are bosses, literal bosses, not just like, ooh, boss babe, but like literal bosses in environments, and then coming into the church and feeling like, I can't lead, I don't have a place, my voice isn't heard. And that is what scares me about the next generation.
Today's episode of Unedited is also brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. You can take classes in everything from photography and creative writing to design, productivity, and more. So whether you're returning to a longtime passion project, challenging yourself to get outside your comfort zone, or simply exploring something new, Skillshare has classes for you. For entrepreneurs just starting out, they have a ton of classes on everything you're going to need to know. But even for those of us who've been working in this space every day, it's important to keep expanding and trying new things. So the fact that Skillshare has classes in stuff like film and fine arts, even animation, is a lot of fun to keep growing and stretching yourself. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for unedited listeners. You can get 2 free months. That's right, Skillshare is offering unedited listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of classes for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/unedited. Again, go to Skillshare.com/unedited to start your 2 free months now. That's Skillshare.com/unedited. And even your experience when you were 12, going to a church where you weren't like everybody else. It's like you almost like you don't belong here.
Yeah.
Or if you're a woman who is leading in all these professional areas and then you come to a church, well, you don't belong here. God can't use you in that way here. Mm-hmm. I can't believe that you as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old going to that church didn't get cynical or say, well, like reject the church because that church was rejecting you almost, you know? How did you stay not cynical, like through all of this?
I don't think...
Because you have a joy about you. And you are so pro Jesus and so pro church. And a lot of people who have been treated the way you've been treated by the church wouldn't share that. So how did you make it? Like, what's the secret here?
Honestly, I think it's just, how could you look at the gospel? How could you look at Jesus and not be so in love with him? And know that there's going to be fissures and fractures within the body of Christ. There just are. And like, I come from a big family. So to me, maybe I think that like, I don't always like my brother. I don't always like my sister, but we love each other always. And so I feel like that's kind of the case for church. Like if God is our Father and we have this amazing gift of Jesus, like how could we not love his body and not love the church and like give an.
So how do you deal with the people that hurt you? Like you internally, not that you confronted them, but like, how do you rectify that? They're like, okay.
Actually, I'm in a season now where I'm walking through a lot of hurt where people have said things like people like literally, we're 11 months old and people have come up against the church. And I'm like.
Because you teach.
Because I teach or because they don't like the structure or whatever. I mean, honestly, Cameron, you could just like fill in the blank in this season. I think that's why I got so emotional with the whole failure thing because it's like, instead of, I grew up feeling like failure was the thing that's going to disqualify you and like you have to hide your failures. And now I'm just like, yo, I'm the biggest failure. And look at how God is blessing this. Like clearly I'm a demonstration of God's grace because I fail quite often. So in this season, I am confronting people, but in the utmost of love and saying, honestly, this is like my line. Hey, for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of the gospel, you don't have to like me, but will you still love the church? And you don't have to stay here. You don't have to be here. Get into a church. Hey, you don't like it here? I'll see you in heaven. But like, don't think that people are the church.
But you're creative. And so a lot of creatives are sensitive, right? Like I couldn't imagine being a pastor and, a family leaves the church and not take it personally.
Oh,
that
bro,
like,
it
if
kills.
I was better, then they wouldn't have left.
Oh,
like
yeah.
It's a rejection of me.
Oh, totally.
How do you deal with that?
You have to, well, I can't, this is descriptive, not prescriptive. I can't say this for everyone, but this is what has been like my saving grace. It's just like, I have seen what our church is going to be. I have seen literally people's lives being changed. And I'm not talking about like, oh, Jesus, life changed. Like literally a guy from our church had a brother that was in narco trafficking in Mexico with the cartel. This guy took a different route, highly academic, taught at a university. His brother got caught up in a bad drug deal and he was murdered. Well, this guy who lived in Orange County, educated, again, professor at a university, took a job at a university in Mexico, bought weaponry, is planning on moving to Mexico City to avenge the death of his brother, gets a mailer from our church that had a palm tree on it that said, you belong here. He shows up to church. I'm preaching that weekend. And he's just like, who? And he's of Hispanic descent. And he's just like, who's this Latina trying to like talking about Jesus? And said, this is not for me, but he stayed. And Matt ended up coming up afterwards. And he did something. We were in the New Wine series and Matt came up as from the perspective of the Psalm about what God's doing in pruning. And this is the pruning perspective. Well, he was so shook. He was so moved. He rededicated his life that night. He rejected the job, the academic job. He sold off his guns. He got baptized and said, my life has been changed by Jesus Christ. He now leads in our worship team. This guy's phenomenal. So how could you care if someone says, oh, I don't like you, bump you, we not your people, bye.
Yeah, but people say they don't like you on a comment on an Instagram video and it sticks with you.
Oh, it totally does. But for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of Jesus, for the sake of the kingdom, I got to keep on going. It's like, you remember that scene? This is what it feels like. Russell Crowe, Gladiator. Oh my gosh, this is going to sound so dramatic, but whatever, I'm dramatic. And do you remember when Lucius goes in the cell and takes just a small sword and shanks his side?
No. I saw the movie 20 years ago. I don't remember any of it.
Why are you breaking my heart? Hold on, do you hear that?
There was a part with a sword.
Sounds of shattered glass on the floor. Cameron!
All I remember is basically the movie poster. So tell me about the scene. Okay, shank him in the side.
He's about to go up against Caesar.
Okay.
He's curried all the favor of the people. He's the underdog. He's the outsider. He's the Spaniard. There's so much of that story that I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm the gladiator. And there's this one scene in that movie where the king, Caesar, goes up to his daughter and says, if you were a man, what a Caesar you would have been. And someone came up to me at my dad's church when I was at my dad's church and said, if you were a man, you'd have taken over this church.
Come on.
And so I think maybe that's why I'm like super close to that movie. But okay, so anyways, here is Maximus in the prison.
Hold on, what did you do with that? What did you do with that
I said,
statement?
thank you. What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to say, dude? What am I supposed to
I
say?
would have punched him in the face.
That would have been a really good look. People already thought I was like a axe-wielding feminazi. Like I'm in grad school. I'm traveling the world. I'm like a 28-year-old single female who's Hispanic, which people are like, you're 1 foot in the grave. You know, you should have like 8 kids by now. So I was already the outlier. I did not want to give fodder for people hating me.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. Dude, there's so much more of that. You just got to keep on going. You just got to keep on going.
How? I mean, like not how. Not the way I deal with criticism is ignorance. Ignorance is bliss, right? So we put stuff out all day, every day, and the first thing I tell somebody when we hire them is never read the comments. Just don't read the comments. Don't let people's troll opinion affect you or what you think you did. You know, do what you do with conviction. Do a great job. Do your best. Cover what you want to cover, say what you want to say, and don't listen to how people are responding to it.
But that's a monologue. I don't know, man. Like, you just have to keep going. Here's the thing. Jesus said, they hated me, they're going to hate you. I'm like, I'm holding on to that. Like, people are going to hate me.
You're okay with it. I'm
not okay with it. Like, that comment stung. In fact, that whole guy, that guy that I was telling you about that said this scathing remark about, like, this is why women should not teach. Like, he actually stripped the video and posted it on his page with a whole diatribe linking my husband and shaming my husband for allowing me the authority. First of all, ain't nobody who allowed me. Boy, I'm not your slave. I fought slavery at age 21. Like, whatever. And I was going to be offended. I was going to leave a comment, but you want to know something? I said, brother, thank you. You just exposed me to all of your tribe. They could hate me, but now they know me. Ha! Guess who loses there, sucker? Bye. Wow. Whatever.
Like I just can't believe the audacity of people. Like my friends who are in the public space and ministering and they're, you know, doing what they're doing out of spiritual conviction, and then seeing what idiots do, and like
it's painful, man.
It's painful for me as a friend. But your story is like you're not a middle-class white guy. I mean, you have an even tougher story that throughout your life, all these different aspects of your life, like you've been marginalized and rejected, and you kept going. And this is like, you are a walking miracle and a testimony of like God's grace and the anointing on your life. The fact that you didn't crumble, the fact that you didn't like give in to the cynicism or the anger and the hurt that I'm sure you felt throughout that. I mean, it's just, you were like one of the eighth wonder of the world to me. Like, it's amazing to see where you're standing right now. And just hearing your story, you know.
You're so gracious, Cameron. You really are.
So how do we fix this? Let's back it up. So Christine Kane, maybe Joyce Myers, you. I can't think of very many, Beth Moore, I can't think of very many women who...
And none of them are pastors.
Right.
Yeah.
But even just speaking, who are invited to speak to the main gathering. It's always the women's gathering, you know? I mean, I'm thinking about... And God bless all the amazing women's conferences. I met you. You don't remember this. I met you at IF gathering like 3 or 4 years ago.
Wait, why do you think I don't remember it?
Well, because you said when you walked in, like, I've only seen you on videos and photos. And I was like, I met you.
No, I've only seen this office space of videos and photos. Because I totally remember that day. I was like, oh my God, it's Cameron Strang. That's literally like, literally what happened.
Okay, so I was like, well, I guess you don't remember meeting me. Okay. So yeah, I met you at
Wait, do you also remember that we met at Exponential in Orlando?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Okay. See, brother, I got your number.
All right. I'm your
matchmaker. Come on.
Well, you know a lot of people. Okay. So, but those like IF and Women of Faith and so many of those, they're amazing conferences. And I go to them. I mean, I go to them. And I'm sitting there going like, why is this a women's conference? Why? I mean, I get, yes, there should be a men's conference and a women's conference.
But no one was talking about menopause or kids.
That's what I'm saying.
Why is it a women's conference?
This was just a come encounter God conference.
Exactly.
Why can't I be here?
Exactly.
And I can only be here because I'm friends with Shauna Nyquist or somebody and she invited me, you know what I mean? But like, I don't get the segregation,
right?
You know, racially in the church, but also in gender. I don't get it.
Yeah.
And how do we fix that? You have 2 minutes.
I think it's a big topic to unpack, but the fact that we even get to have the conversation. Remember at the stages of revelation, this is the awakening, the awareness to it. We might not have any answers right now, but the fact that we could actually openly say this is huge. And the reason why it's huge is because you are a man, and you are also like a white man. So you are a white man with white power, with power too, you know? So if I could say that, and it could be put to the side, but you say that and you open up the conversation, and you should be the ones having the conversation. This is amazing. I think after that, it's asking other senior pastors if they're giving the platform to females on their team. They don't have, it doesn't have to go 50-50. They don't need their wife, because not all wives feel called to co-lead in the way that Matt and I do.
I've seen a lot of, charismatic-ish non-denom church plants will do the quote unquote co-pastoring thing, but like the wife kind of just gets the Mother's Day sermon, or you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like kind of token, and it's not her gifting a lot of times,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, so we're doing this because it's pastor's wife, and we're all kind of rooting her on, but it's like, where's the women who are called to speak, preach, teach? And
they might not be the ones that the pastors are married to.
That's right.
And are you okay with that?
Right.
That already, if there is not a female like once a quarter on platform, maybe ask yourself why. And that's like a great like vetting process now for a lot of churches that I'm speaking at, because I'm so busy. Like I get to pick where I want to go. I want to make sure that I'm sowing into fields. Like I know what I bring. There's a stake in the ground every time I'm there. I pound the ground for God's presence to show up, and that the residual like aftermath of what God does isn't something that goes away when I leave, but it sows seeds into the ground. I know that's what I bring to every house that I come at. So I want to sow into a house where women are esteemed and empowered and valued and loved. That doesn't mean they have to ordain women. That doesn't mean any of that stuff. But hey, can you see the value in the voice of women?
Would you speak at a church that, like a women's gathering at a church, but the church itself did not empower women, but you were invited to be the main speaker for the women's gathering?
I will say that I love caveats on everything. So like you're asking the wrong girl, because I just spoke to 1,000 Mormons last week in Salt Lake City, Utah. Like I'm just like, hey, wherever I can get the gospel, I'm gonna take the gospel, and I will be unashamedly, unabashedly me. I would if there is an undercurrent and a swell. So there is this Baptist church in Texas, and that's as much information as I'll say. It's a Baptist church in Texas that invited me to come in because the women's ministry was slaying it. I mean, slaying it. The most vibrant, the most dynamic, the most growing. They had the most biggest vision, the most diverse, who they were bringing into panel. I saw that, who they were bringing on platform and on panel. And I saw that, and I'm like, this is something that if we can just move the needle, if the church and the men of the church could see what women can do, and how biblically orthodox we can be, and how biblically literate we can be, and how like passionate about Jesus and his church and to vision and mission we could be, then they might move the needle at their church. And so I will say yes. But if it's just like I'm the token brown girl or I'm the token girl, nah.
That's I asked Christine Kane the same kind of question, because I liken it in my mind to like the racial inequality of the 60s, and how the church like had institutionalized racism. I mean, and so like, let's say you were, a black preacher speaking at large black gatherings, and you're invited to come to a white church that discriminated. Would you accept well, then likewise with gender, it's almost like you're being co-opted, or you're being like a token, or you're used. They can pat themselves on the back like, look at our diversity, but it's not, you know what I mean? And then it's like, now it's like that with women in leadership.
Have you read Letters to My Father by Barack Obama?
I own it. And it's one of those books I read like 3 or 4 chapters,
Okay. So this is kind of how I explain things, and we can end the conversation after this if you want, but I could talk all day with you. This is like so fun. You like mentally spar, and okay. So how I kind of like, play this. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because you brought up racial reconciliation and segregation. And so as a woman, you can have various entry points into mainstream Christian culture. And this is kind of how I allegorized it. So like in Letters to My Father, President Barack Obama had stated this is the BIV, the Bianca International version. I'm totally paraphrasing it. But basically it's just like, smile, nod, be kind, get along, and you get your way. And before you know it, and it's genuine, it's not fake, you don't put on. That's one way. That's one African-American, one black man that has made it And that was the strategy. But then you have somebody like Bill Cosby or Chris Rock, where like, I'm black and I'm funny and you're white and you're going to laugh at me and you're going to love me. And that's one way to get in. And then the other way
is roofies.
Or really?
Well, big
really?
Bill Cosby.
Can we focus on the Jello side of Bill Cosby?
I was saying, I didn't know we could even reference Bill Cosby yet.
So you could be political and intentional and strategic. You could be hilarious and funny, or you could be angry and you could be like Black Panthers. Mm-hmm. And each of these three different African-American Black representations have infiltrated and not infiltrated, have changed culture. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the same could be said for like the plight of women. You can come in with strategy and be kind and win and be smart, which was totally President Barack Obama. You know, I feel like Miss Beth has done that really well. Mm-hmm. She's wise and she's educated and she's kind and she's honoring and she's connected and she's served and she's loyal and she's taken so many bullets. So I look at her and I'm like, who cares if you're mean to me on Instagram? Look at Beth Moore. She's the woman who's taking bullets. Or you could be, I think Annie is such a great representation of this. She is hilarious. Like Annie can get along with anyone. Mm-hmm. And she is at a traditional like church where there really wasn't, and I mean, even Pastor Kevin Queen came from a denomination that really wasn't all that empowering of women. And yet he has opened his arms and the church's arms to Annie. And then you have like the angry crew. The angry crew is, And that's the same thing within Christendom. There's still like that angry, bitter Betty crew that are like, trying to bust down doors. I would like to be like President Barack Obama. I will be the most educated. I will be the most kind. I will be the most strategic. And whatever you're going to say about me behind my back, whatever you're going to say about me to my face, it's not going to stop me. I'm going to keep going.
Okay. In the few minutes we have left, tell me about your new book. And is your mom okay with its title?
Actually, she's not.
Yeah,
she put a piece of tape on the title. Okay,
so did not.
She was joking and she sent me a picture of it, but she doesn't like the word. She does not like the word. So the title of the book is How to Have Your Life Not Suck. My mom doesn't like it. But that's okay.
But tell me this. Her voice is in your head, and when you wrote that, you knew she wouldn't like it.
Oh, I totally did. And she also told me, Bibi, I don't want you to say Boaz, Yoaz anymore. And I'm like, sorry, Mom. You're not my audience.
No, that's your bit. You gotta shop that thing.
I actually put it on a bag. I really did.
I know. Yeah. I saw your merch.
Okay, so the book is called How to Have Your Life Not Suck. And what people don't realize, and this, I didn't really want to put this on the forefront of it, but it's rooted throughout the book of Ruth. And so Ruth is a small Old Testament 4-chapter book. And when I was having my quarter life crisis, I was 25. That's when my mom had cancer. That's when I was entering grad school. That's when that guy broke up with me. That's when grandma died. It was just like a poop storm. And I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anyone to help. And the one thing that I wanted was the one thing that I was afraid of, and that was a sense of community. And that's a quintessential sign of millennials. They want to be known, but they're afraid of being vulnerable. And you can't have both. And so 10 years later, learning these amazing principles out of the book of Ruth, actually, it was the very first, this year marks 13 years. I taught my very first Bible study to women, and it was the book of Ruth 13 years ago this month. And I feel like this is such a full circle moment. I think that's why I got so emotional, because I don't know how these doors have opened. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how I'm sitting across from you at Relevant. Like I don't. Like I have no answer except you just keep showing up. And there's this beautiful principle in the book of Ruth that if I get one reader to just read one chapter of the book, it's the last one on legacy, because it holds the principle of providence, that nothing just happens. God does everything for a reason. And I just preached that message at church. And like, it's literally the core of my life right now. And if you look at the life of Ruth, she lost home, she lost husband, she lost hope, she was penniless. The one person she knew in Bethlehem was suffering from PTSD and depression. Like, this woman was living so many of our lives. And yet she was faithful. And what did she do? She showed up and she went to work. And I think that sometimes that's what we need to do. We need to go to work relationally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and see what God does, because you might just be one day away from entering into your field of abundant blessings. Before you know it, our great and glorious Boaz, who Charles H. Spurgeon said is Jesus, sees us and redeems us. That's what I'm living for, because nothing just happens.
That was Bianca Olthoff. Make sure to check out her new book, How to Have Your Life Not Suck, Becoming Today Who You Want to Be Tomorrow. And if you need to put a sticker over that word to please your mom, you can. Follow Bianca on Instagram at Bianca Olthoff. That's Olthoff. And if you're in church leadership, make sure to check her out on the new podcast Called, premiering September 18th. Hey, if you like this episode of Unedited, I'd love your help spreading word about the show. Subscribing, rating, and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts helps a ton, as well as sharing it on social media. Well, I'm Cameron Strang. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time here on Unedited.
Relevant Podcast Network.